Come on, man. She hit 3 straight bombs in the first quarter, loading up from 37 feet, 38 feet. She shot 1 out of my car. Like, what? Bro, what? How is she shooting so far, bro?
32 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks, 7 threes, 11 for 20 in only 31 minutes of basketball. The Indiana Fever say, come on, New York. Come on. Somebody's got to give you this first L, and I guess it's going to be us.
20 long days. That's how long Caitlin Clark had been forced to sit on the sidelines, nursing an injury while her team struggled to stay afloat. For most players, coming back after nearly 3 weeks off means shaking off the rust, easing back into the rhythm, and hoping not to get embarrassed against elite competition. But Clark? She picked the biggest target possible for her return, the undefeated New York Liberty, the team everyone said was untouchable. The moment she stepped back on the court, you could feel the energy shift.
She is the only player in the league so far averaging 20 points per game, 5 rebounds per game or more, 5 assists or more per game. Caitlin Clark is back in action. The Caitlin Clark effect is back.
The arena wasn't just buzzing, it was boiling over. Fans wanted to see if Clark still had that fire, if she could carry her team against the league's most dominant squad. And what happened next didn't just answer those questions, it sent a shockwave through the entire WNBA. Because this wasn't just a return. This was a declaration. A message to every player, every coach, and every critic watching. Caitlin Clark wasn't just back. She was about to turn the league upside down. From the very first possession, it was clear Caitlin Clark hadn't lost a step. She brought the ball up, didn't waste a single dribble, and dropped a no-look dime straight into the hands of a teammate cutting to the basket. The crowd gasped, and you could almost see the Liberty players realize this wasn't going to be a warm-up night. Her chemistry with Aaliyah Boston was immediate. Boston was sprinting the floor like she already knew what was coming, and Clark delivered passes that looked more like quarterback highlight reels than basketball assists. It wasn't just sharp execution, it was confidence, swagger, and rhythm all rolled into one. And here's the crazy part, she still hadn't even scored yet. Just a few minutes in, she already had the Liberty defense scrambling, the fans roaring, and the Fever bench feeding off her energy. But this was only the beginning, because what Caitlin Clark did next turned a hot start into a piece of WNBA history.
Caitlin carried this team in the first half. She single-handedly carried this team in the first half. She was spectacular. 25 in the first half.
Then it happened. The moment that turned a solid comeback into something unforgettable. With just over a minute left in the first quarter, Clark caught fire in a way that almost didn't feel real. One deep 3 splashed straight through. Nothing but net. On the very next possession, she pulled up again, bang. 2 in a row. And before anyone could even catch their breath, she stepped back from over 30 feet out, 6 feet beyond the NBA line, and drilled another. 3 threes. 38 seconds. The arena went insane. This wasn't just a player heating up. This was like watching a video game glitch live on national TV. Even Liberty fans had their phones out, recording what they knew was going viral before the quarter even ended. And here's the kicker. She hadn't played in nearly 3 weeks. No warm-up, no easing in, just instant chaos for the league's top defense. Now I've got to ask, where do you rank that shooting display? Was this Caitlin Clark's true welcome to the WNBA moment, or just the beginning of something bigger? Drop your take in the comments, because fans are already calling it the Steph Curry moment of women's basketball. By the end of the first quarter, it didn't even feel like basketball anymore. Caitlin Clark was hitting shots so deep, so effortless, that it looked more like someone had cranked up the sliders on a video game. She was sitting on 4 threes and 17 points, while the rest of the Fever roster hadn't even made a single field goal. Think about that for a second. One rookie, fresh off an injury, was carrying the entire offense against the most dominant team in the league. The Liberty defense was throwing everything at her, switches, doubles, traps, but it didn't matter. Every time the ball left her hands, the crowd rose to their feet because it felt inevitable. And when she wasn't scoring, she was still slicing up the defense with impossible passes. A spin move into a no-look dime here, a bullet to Boston under the rim there. It was pure control. Clark was dictating the game like a conductor leading an orchestra, and everyone in the building knew they were witnessing something special. But if you thought the Liberty were just going to sit back and let her steal the show, you were dead wrong. Because in the second quarter, they decided to fight fire with fire, and things got physical. When sheer talent couldn't slow her down, the Liberty turned to something else: brute force. Natasha Cloud and New York's defenders started bumping her off the ball, throwing hard screens, and delivering the kind of extra contact that makes you wonder how many whistles the refs had swallowed. Sadly, this wasn't anything new for Clark. Since the moment she entered the WNBA, veterans have made it their mission to test her toughness. And on this night, the league's undefeated juggernaut wasn't about to let her run wild without a fight. But here's the thing: every bump, every elbow, every borderline cheap shot only seemed to fuel her more. Instead of backing down, Clark kept drilling threes from impossible range, kept firing passes that cut the defense to shreds. The more physical it got, the more determined she looked. It was no longer just Clark versus the Liberty. It was Clark versus the entire idea that anyone could intimidate her. And as halftime approached, the sparks of a highlight reel turned into a full-on firestorm. By the time the buzzer sounded for halftime, Caitlin Clark wasn't just playing well. She was putting together the best half of her young WNBA career. She had already buried 5 threes, 3 of them in a jaw-dropping 38-second stretch, and she was hitting nearly 2/3 of her shots from deep. The Fever? They were still struggling inside, missing easy layups that could have flipped the scoreboard. But it didn't matter. Clark alone was enough to keep them alive against the undefeated Liberty. Every time she touched the ball, the crowd leaned forward, waiting for the next explosion. And just when you thought her last highlight couldn't be topped, she drilled another deep 3 to close the half, sending the arena into chaos. It wasn't just a hot hand anymore, it was a statement. A warning shot to the so-called unbeatable Liberty that one rookie, fresh off injury, was already pushing them to the edge. If the first quarter felt like a glitch, the second quarter made one thing clear: this wasn't luck. This was dominance. But halftime also gave the Liberty something they desperately needed: time to regroup. And when they came back out, the game turned into a heavyweight fight. The Liberty walked into the third quarter like a team that had just been embarrassed on their own stage. Breanna Stewart tightened her laces, Sabrina Ionescu locked in, and suddenly the undefeated Giants started to look like themselves again. Buckets fell, stops came in bunches, and the Liberty reminded everyone why they hadn't lost a single game all season. But Clark wasn't rattled. Not even close. She split double teams, fired laser passes to Aaliyah Boston, and answered the Liberty's surge with a step-back 3 so deep, the crowd was on their feet before the shot even dropped. It was like she was daring New York to match her energy, daring them to prove their perfect record wasn't built on shaky ground. And then came the shot that nearly blew the roof off. Clark pulled up from logo range. The arena erupted as the ball floated through the air and rattled out. Even in a miss, the message was loud and clear. She wasn't just here to compete. She was here to break the Liberty's spirit. Heading into the fourth quarter, the Fever were still hanging around. Clark was still hunting for the knockout punch. And every possession started to feel like it could decide the game. The fourth quarter opened like a championship bout, 2 heavyweights trading blows, neither willing to give an inch. Every possession had weight. Every bucket felt like it could swing the entire outcome. The Liberty leaned on their veterans, Stewart dominating inside, Ionescu hitting clutch shots from deep. But on the other side, Clark was refusing to blink. She carved through defenders with fearless drives, set up teammates who didn't even realize they were open, and when the Liberty tried to trap her, she just shook them off with ease. Then came the moment that had the entire building shaking. Clark crossed up her defender, stepped back beyond NBA range, and drilled the shot right in her face. The arena exploded. For a second, it felt like the Liberty's perfect record was hanging by a thread. The Fever were feeding off her energy, fighting like they believed they could actually pull this off. But every time Indiana threatened to seize control, New York punched back. Big threes. Timely stops. The kind of poise you only get from an undefeated team. It wasn't just a basketball game anymore. It was a clash of willpower. Clark versus the Liberty. Youth and fire against experience and polish. And as the clock wound down, it became clear something dramatic was about to happen. With less than 2 minutes to play, Caitlin Clark was still swinging. The Fever had missed layup after layup. Momentum kept slipping through their hands, but Clark refused to go down quietly. She buried one more deep three, the kind that makes an arena erupt even when the scoreboard says the odds are against you. The Liberty held on, surviving by slowing the pace and leaning on their veteran experience. And when the final buzzer sounded, they celebrated, but not like a team that had just extended a perfect record. No, they celebrated like survivors who had just escaped a playoff elimination game. Clark, meanwhile, didn't look rattled, didn't look defeated. Reporters swarmed her, asking about the hits she took, the missed calls, and how close she came to toppling the league's juggernaut. She didn't make excuses. She didn't point fingers. She just smirked and said 4 words that echoed louder than the game itself. "We'll see them again." It wasn't a soundbite. It was a warning, and the entire WNBA heard it loud and clear. It didn't take long for the highlights to spread. Within minutes of the final buzzer, Caitlin Clark's performance was everywhere. Her 30-foot bombs, her no-look passes, and even the stare-down after her and one were looping across social media like wildfire. Fans weren't just impressed. They were calling it one of the best individual performances of the entire season. Even NBA players couldn't resist chiming in. Tweets poured in, praising her range as absurd and her confidence as cold-blooded. The Steph Curry comparisons, already a common talking point, suddenly felt more real than ever. Some even said she had officially taken the spotlight from the Liberty, handing the undefeated team their first real scare. And this is where I want to hear from you. Do you think Caitlin Clark is already the most exciting player in the WNBA, or does she still have more to prove? Drop your answer in the comments, because this debate is blowing up online, and I know fans won't agree on it. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just a highlight night. It was a ripple effect, and the Fever's future suddenly looked a lot scarier to the rest of the league. Back in Indiana, something had clearly changed. Practices suddenly felt sharper, every drill ran with urgency, and even the bench players were louder and more locked in. It wasn't just Clark's stat line that shifted the mood, it was her swagger, her fearlessness, the belief that if she could go toe-to-toe with the league's undefeated powerhouse, then the Fever could hang with anybody. You could see it in Aaliyah Boston, who was sprinting the floor harder, fighting for every rebound. You could see it in Lexi Hull, who fed off Clark's confidence and started hunting her own shots. The entire roster looked like they had been injected with energy. And the fans? They were just as fired up. Ticket sales spiked overnight, with Fever games suddenly feeling more like playoff previews than regular season matchups. Social media threads were already circling the date of the next Liberty Showdown, predicting fireworks when Clark got another shot at the champs. Indiana wasn't just talking about moral victories anymore. They were talking about revenge. And Caitlin Clark was at the center of it all. While fans were still replaying her highlights against the Liberty, Caitlin Clark had already turned the page. Her next opponent wasn't just another game. It was a squad that had been running its mouth all season, claiming Indiana wasn't ready to hang with the real contenders. Clark didn't waste time. Word out of the Fever camp was that she'd zeroed in on their biggest weakness, a shaky perimeter defense. Guards that are slow to close out, rotations that fall apart, and transition defense that leaves shooters wide open. In other words, open season for a sniper like Clark. Her plan was simple but ruthless. Push the pace, stretch the defense until it broke, and once the double teams came flying at her, let Aaliyah Boston feast in the paint. And it wasn't just about scoring. Clark was itching to flip the script physically. After taking hit after hit from the Liberty, she was ready to set the tone this time, making them feel the pressure early. The Fever's guards were drilling traps on defense, preparing to force turnovers and turn them into instant buckets before their opponent even knew what hit them. It wasn't just game prep, it was a declaration. Indiana wasn't backing down from anyone anymore. By this point, everyone knew Caitlin Clark could score from anywhere. But what caught people off guard in her next outing wasn't just her shooting, it was her defense. She started reading passing lanes like a veteran, cutting off outlets, and forcing turnovers that flipped straight into fast break points. One moment she was poking the ball loose on the perimeter, the next she was chasing down rebounds like it was the final play of her life. You could see the frustration building in her opponents. This wasn't just a rookie lighting it up from deep. This was a player turning into a two-way threat, someone who could disrupt your offense and torch your defense in the same possession. It was proof that Clark wasn't satisfied with being just a highlight reel. She was evolving, adding layers to her game, and making it clear that if you tried to attack her, she'd make you pay at both ends of the court. And once she set that tone defensively, something even bigger started to happen. Her teammates rose to her level. For weeks, critics had been saying Caitlin Clark was doing it all by herself. Too many missed layups, too many wasted assists, not enough help. But this time, the script flipped. Lexi Hull started splashing threes from the corners, finally punishing defenders who sagged off to double Clark. Aaliyah Boston went full bully mode in the paint, carving out space and finishing strong every time Clark drew the defense away. Even the role players looked sharper, playing with a confidence that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just Clark dragging Indiana anymore, it was Clark lifting Indiana. Her energy was contagious, her intensity impossible to ignore. Every rebound, every steal, every laser pass seemed to spark a teammate into action. For the first time all season, the Fever looked less like a rebuilding project and more like a team ready to make some noise. And that set the stage perfectly for what came next. Caitlin Clark's next masterpiece, a game that cemented her as the most dangerous rookie in the league. When game night arrived, Caitlin Clark didn't just meet the moment, she owned it. By halftime, she was already flirting with a double-double, and by the final buzzer, her stat line was almost unreal. 32 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds. 1 or 2 missed layups from her teammates, and we'd be talking about a triple-double on top of it all. But even without it, she still rewrote the record books, 7 made threes, the most in Fever history, and another performance that left fans shaking their heads in disbelief. What stood out wasn't just the scoring. It was the way she controlled the game. Every possession went through her hands, every defensive adjustment revolved around her presence. She wasn't just playing in the WNBA, she was bending it around her. By the end, the Fever had the win, the fans had their show, and the league had its wake-up call. The Liberty may still have their undefeated record on paper, but in the court of public opinion, Caitlin Clark had already given them their first real scare. And here's the question I'll leave you with. Was this just the opening act of a rookie carving out her place in history? Or are we witnessing the rise of the player who's about to take over the entire WNBA? Let me know what you think in the comments, because one thing's for sure, Caitlin Clark isn't slowing down for anyone.